Food security, or zero hunger goal is goal to in sustainable development goals. The UN notes that 3 in every 10 stunted children in the world are Indians. Also in India, 53% of women in reproductive age group are anemic. The decreasing trend of undernourishment in Asia has been slowing down significantly. In this case, is this a case of law of diminishing returns? Is it time to rethink and re-strategize our action plan on food security for the future? Now we have today Dr. Vikas Bajpayee, who has worked as a public health physician in the working class areas of Delhi. Dr. Bajpayee has been a consultant with National Health Resource Systems Center and is currently working in the faculty of Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, JNU. He has published extensively on food security, health system and medical research in India. Now we humbly request Dr. Bajpayee to take the podium. Thanks.
Friends, teachers and students, and my fellow panelists, thank you very much for having me here. I was asked to speak on food security, and that's all. There was no qualifier with it as to what on food security. It's such a vast topic. I could render food security as a very technical and logistical issue, and maybe walk away with a self-appeasing sense of omniscience. But that would only amount to mystifying what is food security. I think shorn of its trappings, hunger and food security are nothing but purely political issues to the core, and that is what I would intend to bring to your notice today. Let me begin with a few anecdotes. A couple of years back, we had a workshop at our center on food security, and you all must have heard of Mr. Harsh Mandar. He was there, and while narrating, he presented, he told of his experience while he was training as a young IAS at Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy. And he said that we were instructed that as a district magistrate or collector, you must always keep a bag full of grain in your office. He initially thought it's a very good thing. Maybe they are trying to inculcate that sense of responsibility. But then what followed was quite like this, that the moment you have a case of hunger death reported, you drop a bag of rice anyhow through window or whichever way in that house, so that the family cannot claim that the person died of hunger. This is another statement which I am presenting to you. It was written by a French colonial inspector posted in Western Africa. One can only wonder how it happens that populations who always had on hand 3 harvests in reserve, and to whom it was socially unacceptable to eat grain that had spent less than 3 years in the granary, have suddenly become improvident. They managed to get through the terrible famine of 1914 without difficulty. However, since the late 1920s, these populations, once rich in food reserves, are now living from hand to mouth. as regards our own country. Even though the British, who ruled over India for nearly 200 years, claimed that they had rescued India from timeless hunger, their claims rang hollow in face of the results of an 1878 study that was published in the journal Statistical Society. The study documented that till that time, while there had been as many as 31 famines during the 120 years of colonial rule of British in India, there were only 17 recorded famines in previous 2 millennia of the Indian history. Geographer Michel Watts has observed famines are social crises that represent failures of particular economic and political systems. Further, but 2 years back, I was sitting with Dr. Binayak Sen in a common friend's house. I knew Dr. Sen was working on tea plantation workers in North Bengal, and he had reported to me earlier that the situation of hunger is terrible out there, and that the mean BMI which he found was 14. So I narrated to him findings from my own PhD work in district Sitapur in UP, and as I was about to say that Dr. Sen, the mean BMI in the villages I visited, before I could say, he said 14, and we really laughed. But of course, it was laughter of helplessness. Bad news has stopped shocking us anymore, really. And I really dread the day we would start enjoying it. But let me try and shock you. These 2 villages, Alipur and Ramuapur, they are in Block Pisawa of Sitapur district, which is in central UP. Now, my thesis research work was on the impact of Narega on household food security. And village Alipur, it was a very organized village. Both were Dalit villages. They had this organized, a peasant organization working over there, and they had really fought tooth and nail for implementation of Narega, which had its beneficial effects also, which I have documented separately. But nevertheless, talking in terms of overall well-being of the people, see, the mean BMI in Alipur turned out to be 4.16. And that in Ramuapur, where also Narega had been implemented but quite in the official way, the mean BMI was just 12.97. And for the benefit of those who may not know, as medical students we were taught that a BMI of less than 14 is incompatible with life. So you can just imagine on how little people are surviving in this country. And unlike tea garden workers of North Bengal, Sitapur is nowhere on the hunger map of the country. Now, nearly 69% of the people in Alipur, they were severely thin of all the sample, and I had 40 households in each village. The similar figure was 84% for Ramuapur. People with below normal BMI, they were 91% and 93% in the respective villages. And when you come to children less than 10 years of age, 100% of the children in either village were severely thin. And we shall, wait no ends in claiming food sufficiency in this country. Now the question is, so what is food security and how do we really understand? Yeah, I just Sorry, slide sheet now. Yeah. Sorry for the delay. Formally defined food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Now, this definition can be divided in 4 components, which are, as such, food availability. Food has to be available before it can be distributed and consumed. Then food access, and the access would include both physical and economic access. And the third relates to food utilization in preference with their dietary preferences. Okay? And sanitation and all that, when you include that, it becomes nutrition security. Now, all these 3 aspects of food availability, access, and utilization have to be available for all time. So there is a time dimension to it, the 4th dimension. As such, it may appear simple. But then, if you go and break it further, you realize how complex the problem becomes. Now, food availability. I suppose ever since Green Revolution, we've always boasted that we have food to feed our population. But it is not simply a matter of having enough food. Your ability to be able to have enough food to feed the people would depend on many things. Import and export of the food. And there can be any number of policies that can be cited where Government of India has exported food at less than below poverty line prices to be fed to pigs in Europe while people have been dying of hunger in this country. Even in your state, in Maharashtra, grain from public granaries has been given to breweries to ferment. So all of this is there. Moreover, we almost have stopped talking of the agricultural crisis, farm crisis which exists in this country. And even when it gets talked of, it gets talked of in terms of those farmers who have land, who are indebted, but a large number of our peasantry who are landless Dalits, tribals, okay, they don't even get counted as farmers. They don't even get mentioned or talked about. All these are problems which impact on your ability to be able to produce enough of food. And I mean, there's no time to go into the entire details of it, but I'll try and touch it somewhat later. It depends on what are the relations of production. See, any production, any productive activity, may it be in industry, may it be in agriculture, it's not simply a matter of technique and technology. Okay, and you need skilled people to deploy that technique and technology. Technique and technology for whose benefit? To subserve whose purpose? And these are emphatically political questions which have to be raised. In this country, where chronic dietary energy deficiency continues to be the overbearing problem, nutritional problem, we have governments encouraging farmers to grow cherry tomatoes, gherkins, salads, in order to be able to get good market price, export price, and whatnot. Nevertheless, now food access would depend on food distribution system, purchasing power, subsidies, caste, class, gender, all these things, they come into play. Lest we think that we've opened a PDS shop, the food is available, anyone can walk in and have his fill. I mean, mind you, all the villages I was talking of, they do have a PDS system. They have a working PDS system. But what do you do of it when the entitlement is barely 7 kgs a person per month, which does not even give you poverty line level calories? Now, all these processes, the way they will work, that is determined by the social, economic and political structure of the society. It is this structure which decides the policy paradigm. And policy paradigm could be of two kinds. It could be equality oriented. See, food is there in the market, it's available in the shops. Anyone who wants, they can go and have it. But then we know markets only recognize those who have the purchasing power. There could be equity-oriented policies as well to ensure that those who need the most get the most. So, coming to what the reality is, there was a famine commission set up by the British in 1880, which said that if the per capita availability of food grain goes down to 100 kgs, then it's a famine situation. So, in order to avoid famines, you must always have a supply of more than 200 kgs per capita. And in the table below, it gives the amount of food, per capita food grains availability since 51. Mind you, this includes the years of Green Revolution. In none of the years we have had that much per capita availability of food as was recommended by the Famine Commission of colonial era. I suppose independent India should have provided better for her children. Now, the calorie consumption, you can see that both across the rural and the urban areas, the consumption of calories until at least 2011-12, it has consistently declined. And it has declined in face of booming economic growth, or shall I say boomeranging economic growth, depends from where you are seeing it. I mean, we all sit here, we all are well fed, so we will have a different perspective. We will even have a different perspective of nutrition. Now, let me just point it out to you. These are trends of males and females between two BMI trends. Okay. A percentage of males with normal BMI in 2000, these are the latest figures which were available from WHO website. In 2006, only 56.6% of Indian males, they had normal BMI. Okay. Percentage of males with BMI indicating obesity. In 2006, it was 1.3%. In females, obesity was 2.8%. But if you were to see the media reports and all, I mean, one would come up really scared. Obesity is increasing. It must be. The point is where? In whom? Okay. And from what base? But then it helps to give a spin to the whole issue. Obesity is increasing, we are getting diabetes, diseases of affluence, we are becoming an affluent society. But mind you, in the whole of state of Uttar Pradesh, with the population that it has, as per the latest round of NFHS survey, obese population amounts to just 2.1%. in UP. In Sitapur, the only overweight people I saw, few of them, were in the town of Sitapur. In the entire rural areas that I could manage to visit, I didn't see a single person who was even overweight, and my data shows it was difficult to find one with a normal BMI as well. Obesity, it's classically a class-divided phenomenon. You can see from this, in the lowest income quintile, what is the proportion of obesity? And in the highest income quintile, what is the proportion of obesity? But mind you, presented out of context, all the figures of obesity, they can potentially direct all research on nutrition in a very, very different direction. In 2011, ICMR came up with new recommendations regarding dietary energy norms. In that entire document, at a couple of places, they have mentioned dietary energy deficiency to be the major nutritional problem. And yet, the dietary energies, the recommended levels, they have quietly lowered it without giving even a hint in as much as the reason to that. I'll come to an end. There is a lot that I can say, but you see, what is the major problem? You see, this is a graph which shows the distribution of our workforce by different sectors of economy. And in the brackets are given the productivity of those sectors of economy. Now you can see, majority of the workforce, it is trapped in least productive sectors. Not that there is something wrong with those sectors per se by the nature of those sectors, but it's just that the ruling elite, the ruling classes are simply not bothered about them. What happens to those sectors? Mind you, there were editorial columns in newspapers about 7-8 years back. In an Indian Express I read it. What is all this big talk of food production and all? There is enough available in the international market. We can always import it. Okay. Means we can let the farmers be the way they are. The collective conscience of this nation fails to stir despite the fact that more than 0.4 million farmers have committed suicide since 1995. I mean, elsewhere, I believe, in any country which has even the slightest claim to being humane society, this would be blasphemous. Nevertheless, I'll leave you with just to give you an idea. You know, these are various estimates of poverty that we have, and government never tires juggling with poverty figures to define it as stingily and to apply it to as little as possible number of people. You know, there are poverty lines corresponding to same year which give radically different estimates, all government. I'll leave you with this quote. You know, I wish I could talk more about what is the solution, but whatever it be, question about food security is not how do we feed people. Question about food security is how do we enable people to feed themselves, which is what any self-respecting person would like to do, which is what I would like to do for myself. And doing that means disempowering the powerful to empower the poor. I leave you with this quote of Paulo Freire and just try to absorb. I mean, its import. It's not easily absorbed. Any attempt to soften the power of oppressor in deference to the weakness of the oppressed almost manifests itself in the form of false generosity. Indeed, the attempt never goes beyond this. In order to have continued opportunity to express their generosity, we have had many such generous schemes, you know. The oppressors must perpetuate injustice as well. An unjust social order is the permanent front of this generosity, which is nourished by death, despair and poverty. This is why dispensers of false generosity become desperate at the slightest threat to its source. True generosity consists precisely in fighting to destroy the causes which nourish false charity. False charity constrains the fearful and subdued, the rejects of life, to extend their trembling hands, whether of individuals or of entire peoples, need be extended less and less in supplication, so that more and more they become human hands which work, and working transform the world. And this fight by the oppressed for their liberation, because of the purpose given to it by the oppressed, will actually constitute the lovelessness which lies at the heart of oppressors' violence. Lovelessness even when clothed in false generosity. We are nothing without our people, and we are not going to solve anything unless we mobilize people to solve things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for so much food for thought.